I'm always excited. People know that, but by now, but I am particularly excited today because we have John Leary Joyce on the podcast. John, welcome. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you very much, Yannick. I'm equally excited. I just love talking about Gestalt. So, how many hours have we got?
Well, we've made an hour today, but okay. We could invite you back. I would do that about 16 times, maybe 32, 450. How many hours does it take, you think?
Well, I've been at it 45 years, so I don't think we've got that length of time.
And it's nice to talk to someone who's been in it for, decades and still got that freshness of experience with it. And I have that a lot from Gestalt practitioners, particularly. And that excites me to dive into this today because I haven't studied Gestalt at depth. Every time I meet someone, every time I read something, I feel very connected and related, partly because, my foundation is existential. And there's a lot about working with the here and now, being in the moment, connecting as two human beings in this space. But also because you have quite a history in the field, right? You've been a therapist yourself since the 1970s. You were founding therapist in the Gestalt Center in the UK. One of the first centers in the world that made this into a thing. You've trained with the people who've been, running this whole thing and bringing up the ideas. You've brought a lot of ideas in yourself. You founded the Academy of Executive Coaching, yes. The AoEC. 22 years ago now, in 2000?
2000, yes. Yeah.
So they've been around. You've been a founder and thought leader in systemic team coaching. So you brought the Gestalt perspective, way of being, theoretical foundation, methodology, we'll talk about whatever we might want to call that, into groups and work with organizations. So, you've done something really interesting around Gestalt and tango, coaching and tango. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about that.
I'd love to talk about tango. But yes. So where do we start? Yeah.
Where we start?
I'm so impressed that you've done your homework so well.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think you've earned it, your book, I should mention your book, right? Because
two books, but Fertile Void, Gestalt Coaching at Work is, that was the sort of summation, the totality of my Gestalt and coaching experience in 2014. It's kind of now changed, of course, but yes. And people seem to be really loving it and enjoying it, which gives me so much pleasure.
Yeah. And the other one?
Well, Systemic Team Coaching. I co-wrote that with Dr. Hilary Lyons, which was really just to bring together some of the key concepts and practices to make systemic team coaching work, developed by Peter Hawkins. And we Peter and I are friends and colleagues, and we brought this little book together to make it very accessible. That's what I like doing, is making complex things accessible.
Yeah, and you've done a really good job with that. We talked to Peter a couple of months ago on the podcast as well, and he also has this way to make things accessible. But I like that Peter's writing, sometimes people have a response to it. It's like, now that I hear you talking about this makes a lot of sense. What I really like about your writing, it's really to the point and it's really tangible. And it's so grounded in what can coaches draw from this? What's important here, and how does it relate to practice? So I'd love to do some of that.
Yeah. It's I like to be able to convey how we translate that complex philosophy, whether it's about teams and what Peter talks about, and how do we actually do it? What are the steps that we have to take, and how to do that without it becoming mechanical or formulaic, but still have a sequence. I mean, and this is the connection with tango as well. Tango has a very clear structure and a framework and a way of doing it, but you can get lost in the technique and you lose the flow. And it's how to combine the two that I like to get across and to teach on my diploma program.
Yeah. Oh, I'll definitely pick you up on the dance metaphor because I think it's so rich, right? Especially if it's embodied.
Yeah.
Now, go dance, very different to, here's a framework. So let's start with a framework, perhaps. But what is Gestalt, right? I've heard it being described in so many different ways: psychology of Gestalt, philosophy of Gestalt, a way of being, an attitude, a perspective, a sensibility. I picked up on your book. That was really interesting. How do you describe what it is?
Well, one of the things you said at the beginning was, why are Gestalt practitioners engaging and alive with their practice? It's because we don't have a dogma in Gestalt. There is no right way. The whole point is, how do you take this philosophy and personalize it, make it your own? And so each Gestalt practitioner will have a different perspective, because that's how they see the world. And what I will share with you today and what I share in my book will be different, and maybe even contradict what another Gestalt practitioner has said. So that's what you have to take and bear in mind when you're talking with Gestalt practitioners. They'll tell you something different. Yeah, which is the way life is.
Yeah, I really like that personally. It makes things more complex, but also it allows for this autonomy to really shape the approach, because you're bringing yourself to the work. So how could it not be unique?
Yes, exactly.
But what do they have in common? I wonder, if you talk to 10 Gestalt practitioners, what do they have in common?
Well, the primary component is about working in the here and now. That runs through all of Gestalt practice. How do we maximize the quality of connection, which is the other key bit? It's like our connection between you and me at this instance. I can't see your listeners, so I have only a sort of tentative contact with them, with you as a listener. But it's, how do we make the best of this moment, you and I together in this conversation? How do we make the best of that in the moment? And how do we release ourselves to flow spontaneously and naturally and comfortably? And of course, then the study and the investigation is, how do we then stop that? It's like this, Gestalt would say, we have this natural flow. A lovely book written early on by a woman called Barry Stevens, who said, don't block the river, it flows by itself. And the idea is that you take out, our job is to support the flow by removing the boulders or dissolving the boulders. We don't have to make the river flow, that happens. Therefore, our investigation is, how do we stop ourselves from doing what we really want to do, our heart's desire?
What's the river in this metaphor?
It's just our life flow. The river is our connection, you and I chatting together. That's the flow. We're backwards and forwards, we're connecting, and we're finding the optimum connection that we can have through this medium. The fact that we have an audience, all of the things that are in the field, the context in which this conversation is happening. And probably if we were just sitting down in a pub over a drink, our conversation would be a bit different. We'd say maybe some different things, but right now, this is our field, our context, and we are doing the best we can to engage in this flow together.
Yeah, and that's also quite central, right? The idea that people are always within a particular field. People are always in a context within a particular environment, and they show up differently to different environments.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Our notion of self is not a static thing, but more selfing. That the self that I now show up here with you is different. If my grandson walked in the door 5 years old, the self that he would evoke in me is a completely different, the granddad self would be completely different. And if I'm, facing the police officer because he thinks I've done speeding, the self that emerges, thinking of an incident that just happened recently, the self that it would emerge would be a different self, a different part of who I am. but the whole point is that selfing process is creative. It emerges because of the context.
Yeah.
And then the flow becomes this how creative, and we talk about creative adaptation. How am I able to adapt to each situation as it emerges? As the field changes, how do I emerge? How do I grow and change and adapt to that? So this notion of creative adaptation or creative adjustment is another central component that all of us Gestalt practitioners would agree on. We might describe it differently and we might have a different emphasis. But that's another component. Do you want me to go on? I've got another one in the back of my mind.
I'd love to make it a bit more tangible with perhaps a challenge that someone listening to this or watching this might have, because I'm thinking about you connecting with a client. That client will be showing up in that field that is this coaching space, and they might show up in a particular way, but then they leave the coaching space and they might show up quite differently. How do you navigate that? Well,
of course they do. They will show up with me as you're showing up with me. And if it was a different person here, you would be showing up in a different way. And when you're at your best, then you will be flowing and adapting to whoever is here at the other end. So the client walks in the room, the coachee, they sit down, immediately who they are will be affected. And so am I. And this is the exciting bit. This one, I have to know who am I in relation to this person that's showing up. I have to be aware of myself. I have to notice the impact that this coachee is having on me, and thereby hangs the most amazing skill set that we have at our availability is right now in the moment. This client is having an impact on me. And how can I use that? That's use of self. How can I use that to be of help, to build awareness in the other person? So if the client walks in and I start to feel anxious, well, I can think, well, maybe it is I'm a bit anxious about seeing this person because they happen to be the chief exec of some multinational company. I'm a little bit, it's me that's feeling anxious. But maybe she's feeling anxious and I am connecting because she's walked in, she's affecting me. I start to feel anxious because she's anxious. Therefore, wow, isn't that wonderful? We can start talking about our anxiety together, potentially.
And you brought that in, right?
It's really interesting. As you walk in and sit down, I'm beginning to feel a bit nervous about this. And lo and behold, she'll probably say exactly the same thing. Yeah, I was a bit nervous about coming to coaching because I didn't know what you were doing. And then we have a conversation about nervousness right in the moment. And then, and of course, the other, I'll just keep going here. Let
me jump in for a moment, because I think this is a crucial bit that I know a lot of coaches, it feels very bold to them to bring in their own experience. And I think part of what I wanted to underline, you already said, right? We need to know what's our stuff. If I'm nervous and anxious because of my story and what I'm telling myself, if I frequently find myself nervous when I see clients, then that might not be the kind of experience that would be helpful sharing. But when it's created here, I mean, that's a question, right? But when it's created, when I'm not usually nervous, but I'm coming in and I am finding myself nervous, then really something can come out. So I know a lot of coaches, they're like, how can I tell the difference? And what is going to be helpful of my experience? And what is just me pushing myself into a room where it's supposed to be about the client?
So first of all, you're doing your own personal work in self-awareness. So you have some idea. Do I always get nervous in front of people who I admire? Yes, I do. So maybe this is more about me. If you've got that kind of roughly sorted, you don't have to be, have done, 20 years of therapy to sort this out, but you're reasonably self-aware, you're coming with goodwill, you're reasonably confident in your experience and your capability to work with this particular person, then you always assume that it is yours. It is mine. It's my nervousness. But then the fascinating thing is, why is that nervousness stimulated in me? I can check, is it really about me? But even if I say, look, I notice I'm feeling a bit anxious and a bit nervous about being here. And they say, yeah, no, fair, no, I don't feel at all nervous. Well, so what? What have you wasted? All you've done is disclose a little bit. And in the disclosure, you let something go.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other magical thing about Gestalt. If we simply accept who we are, change, it's the paradox of change. Change occurs, change happens when we accept, when we become who we are. So if I allow myself in this moment to feel a little bit nervous and a little bit anxious, and I accept that and maybe give voice to it because I think this might be useful, then I release myself of that nervousness, and that diminishes and hopefully will add something to the coachee. They will connect in some way with it because it's joint, it's in the field. We're assuming, and this is the assumption, that whatever's going on in me is impacted by the field, by the person walking in the room, and it's how to maximize that. And so I run a whole diploma program, you know, over a year, where you learn how to use yourself in this particular way. And without fail, it's either you've wasted 30 seconds, that's the worst that can happen. You've just wasted some time, or you've made a fascinating intervention that highlights awareness of something that the coachee wasn't really grasping at the time or seeing important.
Yeah.
So I encourage, once you've got your coaching practice, you've got your coaching skills, you know roughly what you're doing, you're reasonably confident in yourself, then you can use this to great effect, powerfully.
Yeah. And people are often thrown by the intervention because people don't usually show up like that, just opening up about their experience, you know, in this space. What's going on for me, using the self as an instrument for change.
The important thing to get across to it, it's not self-indulgence. I'm not just saying this for the good of my own health. I'm saying this in service of.
Yeah.
I'm saying, okay, I'm feeling nervous. I think it's more than just me being a little bit in awe of this person. So I think it's more than that. And I think it will be of service if I share that this is in the field. This is what's going on between us. So there are a couple of elements there about knowing yourself, but also your focus is the other person. I'm sharing my awareness of myself to support, to help the awareness of the other. That's the other key component.
And is this something that you introduce people to in terms of, this is my way of working? They get a little heads up that you might bring in your own experience, or is it just something that happens and you dive into it?
It's hard to, I don't make an explanation of that, because it's often just like having like we are having a conversation. I'm having a conversation. I could be sharing something a little bit more about myself. Well, I could share, I'm in a hotel room at a conference and I'm feeling a bit cold. So I don't think that's anything to do with you. That's purely...
Well, I do connect with you more now, because I have not in a conference room, but my feet, I don't wear shoes at the moment. So, and I've moved not too long ago, and the temperature is different. So I feel something in my feet that you feel around your body. So there is something that, you know, that it's did.
Even at this distance. Lovely. So yeah, I've lost the train of thought there. But
the question was around contracting and to what extent you introduced the approach. And it seems like, well, that's just something that happens. We're having a conversation. So
yes, and I welcome, how are you doing? What are you know? And this is what's going on with me, and tell me what's going on with you. And I try to encourage my coach students to just relax into having a conversation. Central part of Gestalt, another central part, is this notion of dialogue. And that's more than just a conversation. It's about a place where we share ourselves in this sort of generative way.
Mm-hmm.
And that really only happens, as Martin Buber would talk about I, thou, it only happens if I am willing to bring myself, my openness and my vulnerability to the party. I have to be open and willing to change myself. And now it's actually in the ICF competency practice. There is one of the things is about, you know, are you willing to be vulnerable with your coachee? It's embedded in, you know, 3.25, but it's definitely there that a key part of this dialogue is about bringing yourself here. And now most coaches, certainly in their training, are used to performance coaching. It's about what you do. It's outcome focused. It's generally cognitive, behavioral outcome. And it's about how do we achieve certain targets and goals and performance achievements, which is fine. Where Gestalt sits is more what I would call developmental or existential areas, where we're looking at who am I? What's going on with me? How do I show up? What about my presence, my sense of authority, my confidence, my self-doubt? These are not measurable. Performance coaching is evidence-based. You can see it because it's behavioral. Gestalt coaching and existential coaching is experiential based. And this isn't measurable. You can get some indication, but it's not measurable in the same way, and it's not evidenced. Because how do I evidence being happy or sad or even depressed? You just got my word for it. So we are, again, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought there. Can you?
I'll take over.
Please do.
Because I love how you place this on the spectrum of what coaching can be, from skills, performance, developmental, existential. You know,
yes.
Especially at the beginning when coaches come into the practice, they're often taught in most of the trainings that, you know, there's got to be outcomes, there's got to be solutions. We're working forward, we're working solutions focused. You know, we spend some time talking about what the goal, what the aim, what the outcome, what the purpose of this is, what's the change you're trying to create.
Yes.
And Gestalt doesn't tend to do that, as far as I understand, because it's
absolutely not.
Exactly.
No, the opposite end. It's the opposite. So let's be clear. That's really important and valuable stuff. The doing, you know, the outcomes. I mean, I teach Gestalt coaching, and the students have to do stuff. They have to read, they have to practice, they have to do that stuff and improve their performance as a Gestalt coach. But that's only half the story. The other half of the story is the developmental existential. Who am I? How do I show up? And the problem at the beginning, you're going through all of the solution focused doing stuff, which is very good, but it's only half the story, and it will only go so far unless you're able then to add in. So who are you? Let's talk about your confidence, your presence, your anxieties about doing.
Right.
And that's the bit that Gestalt really offers. That's where we sit in this being bit.
So, sorry, but I'm Gestalt is very much not solution focused. I'm wondering, because there seems to be a lot of application for it. Somebody might come in with a goal or an aim or a purpose, and then while they're exploring that, it's not that the coach focuses on the solution or the purpose, but within that, it seems that Gestalt has a lot to offer.
It has a lot to offer in terms of supporting the emergence of the goal. The difference is that one is directed towards the goal in the performance, and it's the fake it till you make it dimension, which is, we know, works, and it's very powerful. I keep on pretending to be confident and take the body posture, in due course, if I keep embodying that behavior, it will change my attitude. And we know that from neuroscience, that we change who we are by the behaviors. But I want to come back to that's only half the story. The other half is where you're talking about is we simply stay and we accept who we are. The paradox of change. Change occurs when we become who we are. In that acceptance, if I sit with you or the coachee with their anxiety, with their uncertainty, and we can provide the psychological safety for that, the answer emerges. Now, the difference between the two is you've got an end goal you work towards, and you're looking at the gap, the competency gap in between, but you have an outcome in mind. With this way, we don't know what the outcome is, and therefore it's unknown. And that's what gives it the magic and the excitement and the creativity, because we are allowing it. So it was like, you know, look at our world economic situation in 2008, economic collapse. Nobody knew the answer. Performance coaching was useless. Nobody knew. They'd never been here. COVID, exactly the same. Nobody knew what was going on. So we had to work with what was happening in the moment. We had to be creative and adaptive. And Gestalt would be much more useful, or would have been, if our prime minister had chosen and our health minister had chosen to listen, we might have had more creative solutions to the COVID situation. As it were, I suspect he had targets that he wanted to achieve, and therefore we went down certain routes.
Yeah, it just goes to show how much here and now focused approaches have to offer, because we live in a world that's going to be increasingly like that. You know, there's going to be increasingly like, well, we've never had this. You know, these are huge changes. Here are paradigm shifts. Here's AI, you know, and automation changing the whole world and what it means to be human. You know, there's new mind-blowing interventions and inventions happening now every couple of years, and it's getting faster and faster. So it seems to me that this kind of work, this kind of approaching people is going to be so much more important going forward than it has ever been.
Yes, of course. I mean, we don't do strategy. I mean, I'm setting a strategy. We're setting a strategy together for the business for the next 2 years. I mean, maybe 3, but that's the maximum. I mean, going back like 30 years ago, you would do a 10 or a 20-year strategy. Now we don't bother with that. Some ideas, but we know that in 5 years' time, something completely different will have emerged. I was just listening to the news yesterday. We're really focused on new energy sources. And of course, we've got all of the ecology for solar and wind power. And my wife and I are building a whole shed for our solar panels. And then I hear that we're going to have nuclear fusion, and maybe we won't need solar panels. So should we invest, you know, £10,000 in solar panels? Excuse me, not now. Sorry. So should we be investing in these solar panels where maybe in 5 years' time they'll be obsolete? Well, we have to make a decision. We've got to adapt. The fusion thing might never happen. It's a massive, you know, fascinating breakthrough that happened, I think, just a couple of days ago. But you know, that could change the world. And
could also not. You know, we don't know.
And it may never happen. So yes, we're constantly in emerging thinking and emerging changes. So the Gestalt notion of creative adaptation is a key skill that I think we need to learn. And of course, organizations are learning how to adapt. And we've got all of the stuff around agile coaching, which is a sort of mixture of both. Agile coaching has a lot of structures in it to make it agile, but it also has quite a lot of the emerging component.
Yeah, and I mean, agile, adaptation, change, you know, there's this it still implies that we need to do something differently, or we need to be different. We need to be more resilient or more agile. So given that that's so strong in the narrative of why people hire coaches, I wonder how you navigate people's skepticism of why are we not focusing on what we need to change. This seems like a counterintuitive approach to many. I mean, I'm on board, but if I'm thinking about some people buying into coaching, they're like, what do you mean we're not going to set goals and targets and outcomes and address change or be driven by that?
That's not my job, is to tell someone else how they should or shouldn't run their business. If they come up saying, you know, my goal is to set whatever targets, I'd say, yeah, fine. Let's have a look at how are you doing that? Mm-hmm. How are you showing up to do this task? What's getting in the way? How is the organization flowing? If this is your idea, who else is engaged in it? How do you feel? What's your presence as you come forward to present this idea? What are the doubts and uncertainties you've got? So my interest is not, because I'm already saying to you, performance coaching is important. It's valuable. We believe we've got goals to go towards. But it's coming back to the how we do it. Gestalt adds the who are we in the doing process, not just the doing itself.
Yeah, so you're not going to shut down a conversation because somebody comes with metrics, goals, and outcomes. But what you're focusing as a coach is the experience and what's happening here and now, and how are you showing up to this?
And if they said, look, what I need is some help with the metrics, I'd say, well, look, I think there's probably somebody better that will help you with the metrics than me. I'm not much good at metrics. I'm not much good at solution-focused things. So why don't I refer you to someone else? If you've got an issue about who I am and how I deliver this, then I'm your man. You know, come to me and I will support you in identifying how you go about communicating this to your team, to your staff, how you overcome objections, how you hold back or oversell. You know, how do you get that's where Gestalt will add something.
Yeah, there's a beautiful quote in the book in the introduction where you write that writing about Gestalt is in itself a contradiction. Yes. And the bit that comes afterwards is, I think, so helpful to understand what the coaching experience is, because you write in that the experience in the moment is fundamental to the approach. And interpreting, structuring, organizing information and reflecting is what we do when we write.
Yes.
And how many coaches can pause for a moment and think, how much of my coaching is interpreting, structuring, organizing information and reflecting?
That's right. And when I supervise coaches, so much of the time, the problems with the coaching relationship comes because they're trying to think about the next intervention. What's the next powerful question? You know, and that really disables you, because you're thinking about the future. You're not there in front of the person, being with them. And if we can maximize the change because that's when change happens. It's in the moment. You can't change yesterday or tomorrow. It happens right now. So how do you maximize that? And in a way, one of the things I quite provocatively say to my Gestalt student is, you're not allowed to ask questions.
I wish people would have seen that. Go to YouTube now and look at that face. I think that captures it quite well. What do you mean? I'm a coach.
Yes. And you see, the problem is we get caught up, especially if we get a little bit hooked on this notion of powerful questions. And we get a little bit frozen, we can do, about having to think of the powerful question. What I find more useful and more fascinating is, what is the thinking that has occurred before the question emerged? Okay, and then try offering the thinking, the hypothesis that's emerging, instead of asking the question. So I could ask the question, how do you feel? Okay, that's a very valid question. But if I say, I notice you smiling and I can see you're really enjoying it, and I'm feeling excited. Is that the same for you? Now, you now know something about me. I've given you some information about my observation of you. Now we have a connection about emotion. I'm not simply saying, how do you feel? And this is what I'm trying to encourage more and more, is that I mean, I say provocatively, don't ask questions, but that's only to make you stop and think, what is the thinking that occurs before the question is formulated? And you see, that is the hypothesis. That inquiry in yourself is happening because of the relationship. The coachee has said it sparked something in you, either somatically in your body or in your thinking, or some metaphor, or something has happened within you. It's more it's more engaging, it's more in the spirit of dialogue to simply just say that, rather than go through the machinations of forming it into a powerful question.
Yeah, there's definitely some contrast here, because the ICF, especially at master's level, really pushes coaches to keep their questions very simple. And all of that stuff that comes before the question, it feels like they deliberately want to cut that out. So
I think that's a misinterpretation. I would, you know, when I speak to some of the ICF people, there is a bit of a debate here. They're talking about keeping it simple, so you're not getting into this framework of having to ask powerful questions. But keeping it simple was really more declaring more of who you are in the process, rather than having clever questions. So keep it simple. Let's just be here together. I'm curious, and I'm sharing my curiosity. It's that, it takes a huge amount of confidence, it has to be said, that that simplicity and that ease and confidence opens up all sorts of areas. It pops into my head. I was talking to one of my tango colleagues about dancing, and she said she had the opportunity to dance with a maestro, one of the top world tango dancers. She said it was orgasmic. Like, what did he do? He said, I don't know. It was so simple. It was so easy. I just was floating. He was guiding me in a way where I just became myself. I wasn't worried about what I should do or how I should be with him. And he was a maestro, so I could well feel, you know, I'm not good enough. But there was something about his presence and the simplicity of the dance. He wasn't doing any clever, complex moves like you see on Strictly. We were just dancing together. And it was the quality of connection that was important, not the cleverness of
not the clever moves, not the powerful questions.
That's what I think MCC is getting at. And that's what I find, and I'm trying to encourage with my students, is keep it simple. You know, active listening is just so powerful. We really underestimate. I just keep narrowing my students down. Just reflect back. What's going on with you? What you see? What you think? What you feel? Just keep that. That's the great basic part, because it's central to Gestalt. Change when you accept who you are. Just stay with it. You and I together, we're being ourselves. We're having this lovely conversation, and I'm really enjoying it. You look as if you are too. So, hey, we're having a good time.
Yeah, that curiosity goes so much further than questions, than asking questions. Being in a space with a sense of curiosity, listening inside of us with a sense of curiosity, sharing with curiosity. I mean, we're in a curious space. We don't always need to ask questions.
That's what I think Gestalt has to offer here. How do we, and it's all enshrined in the ICF code around coming with curiosity. It's just that we take this right to an extreme and almost saying, actually, all we need is curiosity. That's it. full stop. Let's just hang in there and be curious together. And that will get us where we want to go.
Yeah.
So that's the emphasis.
Something I wanted to explore a bit more is that you mentioned it a couple of times, this paradoxical theory of change, that when we become more who we are, when we accept who we are, in that moment, there's a change. And you describe it as effortless, right? Yes. And that's really interesting. And I'm sure so many coaches will be like, what, but isn't this work? I mean, change is supposed to be work. I mean, can it really be effortless? So how do you, maybe just explain that a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, and that's my little secret. Gestalt is effortless. It's not work. You get paid for doing this, really.
You might see this on my laptop, but it says working, not working.
That's lovely. And I guess you're not working now. We're doing a job together, but we're both enjoying it, and we're just being ourselves. In the moment. Think back to my original metaphor about the river flowing. Okay, so our job is to take the boulders out of the river and it flows. We're not trying to make it flow faster or slower. It just has its pace. So that the change occurs, really it's basically saying if we unblock, if we change by allowing ourselves to be, we then for that moment flow. And we know that active listening works, right? That we know that's our 101 for our coaching practice. But why does it work? It works simply because you're saying to your coachee, I accept what you're saying. I accept who you are. And this is what I've heard of what you're saying in that. And in that moment, the coachee goes, oh, wow, isn't it great just to be listened to? And I feel different because I've been listened to. And then something else pops up, pops up and pops up and pops up. So that by simply staying with that, then what we're saying is the flow of life happens. And if we can allow ourselves to go with it, and if we are creative in our adjustment, then we enjoy the moment, the flow, and the change occurs. That we are really, the change is we allow ourselves to be who we are. And we know from high performance athletes that the peak moments, and everybody knows the peak moments is when you stop thinking. Tim Galway, wonderful inner game of tennis, golf, music,
skiing, work.
It's about letting go of the inner voice, the inner critic, and letting our bodies flow. The inner game is exactly Gestalt in action. We release ourselves from the having to and let our bodies do the motion, the talking. And in a sense, rather than so much change, you're allowing life to happen. And of course you can't force it. You can't fake it till you make it, because the paradox of change is change occurs when you become who you are, not when you try to be what you're not. Not for a long time that confused me. It's a thing. Change does not occur. The key bit is that change doesn't occur. I reframe that as change. When you try, it's work. That's effort. It's effort to be different. Fake till you make it is hard work.
Yeah, right. You can change because you can choose to change your behavior, but it's going to remain work until you accept who you are. So there could have been a period of change, and then you settle into who you are. That might mean you go back and then you go forward, or it might mean now you've arrived and it doesn't require effort anymore because it's become who you are.
Exactly. Yes. And you see, I see that in my tango. I put a lot of work into learning the technique, the structure, the posture, everything, the rhythm of the music, everything, a lot of work, a lot of doing. And then the magic moments come when I let all of that go and I'm simply there with my partner. and hope that she experiences it also as orgasmic. I don't think that's happened yet.
It's quite the word.
Told, but ultimately, when I can simply be there in my dance, and this is why we dance tango, is that those moments happen for us when we're flowing with our partner and the music and the dance floor, and it becomes one. And we're no longer trying to do the steps, trying to work out the rhythm.
Yeah.
And same in our coaching practice. I guarantee that your best coaching sessions are whenever it's all fallen away and you're just sitting there, and either the questions or the responses just happen without effort. Those are your best coaching sessions. And I think Gestalt has got a faster way of getting there. Our whole philosophy is based on the effortless bit and about not trying, and have some techniques and skills and ways of doing that. I think Gestalt offers that, because we're saying, don't bother about bloody questions, just reveal who you are. It's so much easier. It's a little bit more scary as you don't know what the outcome's going to be and you're exposing yourself, but nevertheless, in that moment, you release and you flow. You are who you are. They are responding to you, and you have this, in Gestalt, we sometimes call it the aha moment. We just, there we go. We've connected. The I thou moment has occurred.
Yeah. And so I think it's important that we highlight that it's not that it's all without work and it's all coming effortless. You still put work into practicing the steps, getting to know the steps. It's not that your coachee doesn't have to work and all their change is just effortless. No, they're putting themselves in and they're working hard. But in that space, a lot of the change occurs as you are tuning into that moment and becoming who you are. But I think that interplay between change, effort, and work, and on the other side, creating the space where you can allow the change to flow, but without focusing on the work, that's really difficult to wrap your head around.
It's about having both. And then the skill comes with getting that balance between asking the question, a simple question, and supporting an outcome. What do you want from the session? What do you want to achieve now? Or, to having a future, traditional, having that, and then knowing when to let that go and just simply be present in the moment. We don't need that anymore. The work is now happening in the moment, where they're experiencing some usually emotional blockage, difficulty, sense of anxiety, uncertainty, and we can just hang in there and hold the space to be in that moment. And then the insight and the learning emerges. And then you may then go on to say, well, how does that apply? And what do we do about it? And how do we, it's finding that combination that we're aiming for.
So okay, what are we going to do about it now? And how do we move forward? I'm thinking a lot of coaches get trained in, right, so we're nearing towards the end of the session now. Let's design some actions, or let's move forward. Given that Gestalt is not solution focused, would you still do that work, or would the client do that work, or is it just let it flow from here on out?
So we sit and we do a bit of work about anxiety and uncertainty and feelings of powerlessness, and then power, and how do they, and we go through all of that, and they get a greater sense of, when do I take my power and when do I relax and let it go? And we do that. And then they have a presenting issue about, how are they going to work on the strategy with their team? I say, well, having done that, what do you think about this original thing you were talking about the strategy? What do you want to do about that? And they say, I've got it. I think what I need to do is bum, 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 bum. Because all of the anxiety and uncertainty and the issues that were the boulders have got in the way of the flow of knowing what to do about the strategy. We haven't discussed it. It's perfect coaching in that they know all about the strategy that they need to implement. I've just helped them unblock themselves so that they then go on deliberate. And I might say, so what are you going to do now? And they'll say, well, I'll do this. Then I say, fantastic. Yeah.
What if you didn't get there? What if the client hasn't quite reached that unblocking and you're still in an exploration. The actions don't quite flow. It's 5 minutes to the end of the session. How do you end?
Well, you end with, this is where we are, right? Mm-hmm. So we've done this exploration. And when I ask you, what are you going to do about the strategy? You say you're not entirely sure. And I said, so what have you noticed so far? Well, I've got this far and I got stuck here. I said, fantastic. Okay, so now you know this bit is now free. You got rid of these boulders. There are still a few here. So what do you want to do? How are you going to manage that?
Yeah.
And we'll have then a few minutes discussion about that. We might say, do you want to come? Have we time for another session to see what we can do about these other boulders that are getting in the way? And they'll say yes or say no. And they say, okay, fine. So let me know how it goes. And when you come back to the next session, we can see, what did you manage?
Yeah.
The one thing often coaches get caught up with having to get somewhere. And sometimes Gestalt becomes synonymous with getting somewhere deep. You know, you want to resolve something fundamental and powerful. And Fritz Perls, one of the originators of Gestalt, always talked about peeling the onion. You take one layer at a time. You're not going anywhere. You're just attending to this layer, and then this layer, and then this layer. Now, there may be an objective and a goal and all the rest of it, but in a way, we're trying to let go of that, hold it lightly, and then just say, where are we now with this issue? What's going on? We're not trying to get to some deep, depressing, frustrating place. We're just saying, so where are you now? Oh, I'm feeling frustrated. Okay, well, let's stay with the frustration. What happens when you say, well, that reminds me of the time when I couldn't get this done. I say, let's stay with that. Now, what does that tell you about this and about this and about this?
Yeah, you really don't know where this is going to go. And this is where I hear trust the process a lot. And what a wonderful thing to say. And often I think it's getting thrown around quite lightly. And in Gestalt, you hold a lot of things lightly, which I love, all this methodology and all this theory. And there's a lot there that can help us, but we're holding it lightly. But trusting the process is something that you take very serious.
That, if we're looking at the core components in Gestalt, all Gestaltists would say we're trusting the process. Now, I take that to really literal meaning. Say, look, give up on the future. The only goal in Gestalt is awareness. So that's at the purest level, change occurs when we become who we are. Therefore, just simply hang out there in awareness, mindfulness, this connection with mindfulness and existentialism. It's just being here in this existential moment and present in the moment. And that we trust that this unblocking will occur. Now, it has to be said, just as a caveat from my experience of psychotherapy, we're not dealing with people who are in deep trauma or severely depressed or schizophrenic. We're dealing with our ordinary functioning people who are struggling, ordinary neurotics, as Freud would say, healthy neurotics, in that we're just struggling with how we engage in our life day to day. Our job as coaches especially is not to try and heal the wounds of the past. We're not psychotherapists. We're not trying to sort out those. We're saying, these are the limitations. How can we unblock some of them so that you flow more easily? And that's why I think Gestalt works really well for coaching. It has obviously a whole psychotherapy dimension, because that takes 7 years, not just, a year or 2 years, to be a great coach, because you're having to deal with psychopathology. And that's a whole different ballgame. Don't have to be concerned about. If we hit that with our clients, coaches, then we refer them on. And I instill that with all of my Gestalt students. Know your limits. Know when what the work you're doing is touching on, that awareness is stimulating some trauma from the past, and it's not your job to address that. You have to refer on, and that's where you need a supervisor. Where is the boundaries? Where is the work that you're doing touching on something that is out with your capability, and you need to refer on. And I'm glad I had an opportunity to say that, because that's really important.
I would have asked about it. It's on my list, because, you know, when we open up a space to just really tune in, what happens when we don't know where this is going, and heavy stuff might emerge. But I think you've said everything you said. But there was one thing.
Could I just add?
Of course.
Just in that bit, it's important. It's really central that you provide what we now generally talk about, psychological safety. It's so important to do this work. And I spend a lot of time with my students talking about how do we arrive and how do we create the safety. We talk about the safe emergency. Our job is to create anxiety. We have to keep our coachees on the edge of their seats, not falling over or sitting back complacently, but on the edge. The level of anxiety that mobilizes the change to happen, the insight, the learning. And you have to create the safety for that to happen. And I also am allergic to the word resistance. I never try not to talk about resistant client, because it just means that you've not created enough safety, and the direction you're going in you have not listened. The dialogue hasn't happened enough so that you've understood the context in which they are working, the psychological frameworks, and you've tried to do something too fast, too quickly, too deeper. And therefore the client is saying no. And you say, absolutely no. Okay, let's go back to what was the last layer of the onion that we were at before we went.
Too far, too soon. We're not cutting into the onion. We're, peeling one layer off at a time.
And that comes through creating what we now always talk about is psychological safety, this confidence. And that comes from you as the coach sharing who you are, being vulnerable, saying, I can be vulnerable too. Wherever you're going, I go with you. I'm not sitting here as an observer of you struggling in your chasm. I'm going to get into the chasm with you and get to experience what it's like to be in your world. Obviously, I can't do that, but I can have a sort of a sense of it and a deep empathy, because I can connect with the chasms in my own life and say, yeah, I'm alongside you. We're working on your chasm, but I know some of my chasms, and I can journey with you because I know my chasms. And that then creates a sense of safety and security. And that's why we have, the groups of survivors of anything. When they come together, they suddenly feel heard, because these other people know they've been in similar experiences. Know what it's like to be there. And they can just simply say, yeah, I'm with you. I know what it's like. And you don't have to say much.
This is really interesting for me as someone who also works phenomenologically, right? We believe that our experience, we cannot really fully understand somebody else's experience, regardless how close our experience might have been to theirs, right? We might have both lost our dream jobs, or got a divorce, or fell in love, or saw somebody dying. And chances are our experience is very different. And yet so many clients choose their coaches based on having this illusion of them knowing what they went through.
Yes. The difference is, if they really knew what the coach went through, then they probably would be making the right choice. The trouble is they make the choice based on what they think, or what the coach has written about in their biography of themselves. When they show up, they may not be willing to share some of that. I mean, if they say, well, look, I've been through serious bereavement, my family, this and that, then the chances are, if they're really in touch with that, that will be the right coach, because although it's obviously not the same, there's the sense of I can be with you and I can hold you because I know what it was like to be held in that space myself. I can offer the holding, and I do this with my arms. I'm trying to convey this. I can provide the space where you can be free. I am not afraid of the space that you're going into because I've journeyed through that. Now, if the coach really has been through it and it's not just words on a piece of paper, then the chances are they are exactly right.
Yeah. So it's about the holding of space. And while it seems important that the coach is in tune with their experience and what they have gone through life, we don't have to have experienced deep trauma in order to work with someone who went through something really difficult. Not that as coaches that's common, but we don't have to have had our company dissolved in order to work with someone transitioning from that experience into something new.
It's likely you would have had to have some experience of a transition for you, or even traumatic, so that you have some. It's not nowhere near the same experience, but you've been on a journey of grappling with this issue of uncertainty and failure and collapse.
So you can relate, literally, like you can relate to the person, they feel the relation.
And if you don't, then you declare that. Said, this is amazing to be with you. It's not an experience of mine, so I'm not sure how I can be with you since I don't know that. So even disclosing that, then well, let me tell you. If you haven't, let me. I say, yeah, fine, go for it. But it's pretending that you understand when you don't.
Yeah. There was another. Sorry, go on.
If I say, look, I'm sorry, I don't understand this, would it be better for you to have someone that does? I open up the experience, the opportunity for that person to say, yeah, I really do need someone who's been through childhood trauma, because I know and I need to be with a coach or another person who knows about that and knows how it's, permeated my whole being. I say, well, that hasn't happened to me. So maybe I can. Do you think holding? Yeah.
Do you think that would be important? Like, would it be important to you as a practitioner to have a certain degree of understanding or a certain, being able to make relevant links to their experience based on yours?
I think I have to make relevant links. And if I can't, I have to disclose that.
And if you disclose that,
then if I disclose that, I leave it open for the coachee to say, yeah, I think I need to find someone. Can you help me find someone? I then have to be open to saying, this is the best I can do for you.
And if they want to work with you, would that be like that? You'd be happy if they want to work with you on that basis, or would you prefer that you have some link to?
If I have disclosed who I am and what I can offer, and they're saying, yep, that's fine. This, be with me. I'll say, fine. I'll do my best.
Right.
And at any point, it doesn't feel enough, or I can't relate. That I know this. I have, I had one supervisee who had a client who was feeling, this is years ago, their boss, they felt, was coming on to them sexually. And she disclosed that she'd been sexually abused in the past. And I was supervising my coachee and saying, you can't not acknowledge that, because that reinforces the whole secrecy, but it's also not your job to take this any further. Your job is not, you have to help her find an appropriate person. What you can do is help her identify herself as a woman now, and how she addresses this boss who is making inappropriate comments, and what does she have to do as a woman, rather than, to access the child. Yes, find a therapist who can help her heal the wounds of the past. But your job is to see, with that knowledge, how do I help you then access the strong woman in yourself to actually tell this person to stop it, or manage themselves, or leave, So that's where the difference comes. And it's declaring honestly where your capabilities lie, and being confident so that you can say that, and the coachee will stay or leave, and it's fine if they leave. And if if we are desperate about not having enough clients, then we may not want to say that. So, but this is where we would be heading for.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was one question earlier that occurred to me, and I wondered, because it's about getting access to who you really are, and that the change happens there. And I wondered what happens when someone accesses who they really are and they just really don't like themselves as they are.
Well, you already know it. I mean, we're not uncovering something new here. We're uncovering something that's denied, but everybody knows their worst parts because they know they come out. Like our worst parts of ourselves come out, you know, when our partner is shouting at us, or we know the devils in ourselves. We just don't like to own up to them. So you know, and again, obviously, if someone has DID, dissociative disorder, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah, we just commented on that. Yeah,
we're just talking about those parts of ourselves that we don't like. So the coaching session is, again, we accept who you are. So we accept that you have some nasty moments. Sometimes you're a horrible person and you say some really unpleasant things. Let's just hang in there and understand this part of you. It's not the whole of you, but let's just get acquainted with that part and what stimulates it and why does it come out, and where can that part that is really aggressive and hostile, where could it be useful? Where might that part of you be effective in defending your kids or your partner, or somewhere where you'd be standing up for something and you need that level of aggression? Where you're kind of expressing it towards your kids is not really appropriate. So let's see what's going on there. And how do you become, because usually the thing we deny rules us. What we deny comes up and catches us. And so this is the Gestalt thing, is become aware of it. You accept it. It no longer rules you and it becomes useful. And that's the change process.
Correct.
It's when you accept, I accept that I'm a nasty person, and sometimes my nastiness comes out. And if you ask my kids and if you ask my wife, they'll say, yep, we know that part. And some of my colleagues would say the same. Yes, it's there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been really useful. When another dog attacked my dog, I made sure that nastiness came out to protect my dog and tell the owner of that nasty dog, you know, he needs to keep it on a lead and a muzzle. And, you know, that hostility is useful at that.
Yeah, but it's about a field, right? Which context, which parts come out. Richard Schwartz says no bad parts, right? But they can be misplaced.
And being creative. So when I slip into these habits, reactive habits, I'm not being creative. I'm not seeing the potential options. I'm getting stuck in a sort of hostile behavior that's an old habit.
Yeah, and if we accept that, if we are aware of it and we accept it, at that moment we change.
At the moment, yes, we say, here it goes again. Here I am. Okay, so this is me, and I know a little bit about this, and I know where it comes from, maybe. And okay, so what else could I do?
Yeah. Oh, this is great. John, I'm having an eye on the time, but I did want to talk about dance a little bit.
Quickly.
Coaching, what a dance, you know? I mean, I want you to say what you want to say about why dance and coaching work so well together and why you work with it. And I have a curiosity about the leading aspect of it. Because in dance, especially in classical dance, especially in tango, there's somebody who leads, right? It doesn't mean necessarily that they have power here, but there is an agreement over who takes the lead. I'm curious about that in the context of coaching.
Well, tango is especially fascinating and useful, I think, more than any other dance, partly because there's no choreography. I mean, people come to me and say, I can't dance because I've got 2 left feet. I said, look, can you walk forwards? And can you walk backwards? Yes. Okay. Then you can dance tango. Because like active listening, tango is basically a walk, two people walking together in unison, in connection with the music as it happens. But it's about what is most important in tango is the quality of contact and the simple act of walking together. Now, when you watch Strictly, there's all sorts of other stuff that you do there, but in essence, you start off, you feel the connection, which is what we do in Gestalt coaching. It's about the quality of connection, and then you keep it simple. You're taking one step at a time. You're maybe enjoying that step. The other component about tango, and of course, walking, is when you walk, one foot is grounded. You have to have one foot on the ground, and the other leg is free. And so you have this combination, almost a contrast between the solid groundedness. In order to be free and creative, you have to be grounded. And this is where you get the wonderful leg movements in tango, is because you have got fantastic balance. Each one of those maestros is absolutely solid on one foot, and the other foot floats in the air and magically moves. That's the maestro.
Yeah. Make the link to coaching here. This seems like such a rich metaphor.
So you have to know your theory, your practice, your ethical principles, your boundaries. You have to know why you're there and what you're doing. And then once you're centered and grounded in that place, arriving in your place of confidence, then you play. You've got the freedom to share yourself, to ask silly questions, to get up and move around and even dance, or whatever occurs to you in that spontaneous moment. And this is the thing, as I said, each step in tango, Argentine tango, not stage tango and not ballroom tango, is improvised. And you're aiming for the flow, the effortlessness, but it does come with some work.
Yeah, that
years of it, actually.
I think that's in your book somewhere as well, that every session is an experiment. Yeah, I got it here. Each intervention can be fresh and alive. Each session is an experiment.
And in tango, each step is a journey together, just taking one side step. How do I communicate that? How do we do this together? Where I am sharing this. As the leader, I initiate the step. And then as the follower, we move, like initiating the intervention. Statement, the question, you initiate it, and then you flow together and you arrive, and then there's another intervention and you flow and you arrive. So it becomes, we often talk in tango about it being a conversation between your partner and the music and the dance floor.
And it's relational. You need to be aware it's embodied, right? It's like, I think every dancer will be a better coach for it.
I'm about to run a 2-day tango Gestalt coaching workshop. I'm sorry you didn't know about it, because you could have come along. But this is 2 days of exploring, first of all, the tango structure, the creativity, and then how do we bring that embodied awareness to the use of self component.
That's amazing.
In coaching and focus on the flow, because of course you can only dance with your partner in the moment. So it really grinds you in that space.
Yeah. Oh, great, John. We could talk for hours about this.
I said, how many hours have we got?
Yeah, I do want to let you go, respect your time.
Thank you.
John, is there something you want to tell coaches about, other than, I mean, you've said a lot, but if people wanted to get more into your sphere, are there other training opportunities?
I'm running, I don't do that much. I'm chief executive of the Academy of Executive Coaching now. And I'm also running this Gestalt program, a diploma, moving towards ICF level 2. And I have kind of about 16 people on the program. So it's a small group. It's just me with some assistants, and we have a series of workshops and supervision groups. And we try to keep it as flexible and creative as possible. And I have such fun doing it, and people enjoy. yeah, they have said they enjoy it. So evidence.
Wonderful. John, thank you so much for making time. Thank you for your work. This is really, I know this will be deeply inspiring to a lot of coaches. And well, I appreciate your voice being out there and just your general vibe. Like you have clear such passion and enthusiasm for it. So I think that's how we best learn. So appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Yannick.
Bye-bye.